Maybe don't know.
This time, this time, this time, this time, this time to build, 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 this time power, this time to build power, this time to build power, this time to build power.
What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Chris Hampton.
I'm Juliet Hammer.
It's really nice to have another reason to have you on here. The last time we talked was a little bit of a heavier topic, and I'm really excited to dig into today's topic because you're just coming off of a season crushing Southeastern boulders.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
I know this was your first winter season back after being away from Chattanooga for a while, right?
Yeah, so I grew up in Virginia and then went to college in Virginia as well. So my previous experience with climbing in Chattanooga was just kind of winter break trips and a couple of Triple Crown competitions. So I'd never spent a whole season in the Southeast.
Yeah, that's fun. What was your the thing you were looking forward to most going into the winter season?
I think I mostly was just excited to climb on sandstone, I'd say. I tried not to have any major specific goals, just because I had no idea how I'd be climbing after 6 years of living in Colorado and climbing on granite. So I just remembered feeling really humbled the last time I climbed in the Southeast, the number of years ago. So just kind of had low expectations.
The Southeast kind of has that effect on people, I think. I can't tell you how many times I've been humbled there.
Yeah.
That also sort of brings me to an idea I've been toying with, and I'm just going to mention it here so that it's out in the universe and then we have to do it. We should do an episode on transitioning from granite boulders in the West to sandstone boulders in the Southeast and vice versa. And we could just trade experiences and, what the differences are.
Yeah. I'd definitely be psyched to do that because I'm actually heading back to Colorado for a trip this summer. So I'll be doing that transition myself. And yeah, it's been a while since I've been back on granite. So I'm excited.
Awesome. That's perfect then. We'll definitely do that. All right. Before we get started here, can you tell everybody where to find you on the interwebs?
Yeah. I'm on Instagram at Juliet, JULIET_Amanda. And then my website is julietamanda.com.
And what do you do at julietamanda.com?
Yeah, I am a climbing and strength coach. So I work with climbers of all different levels to create holistic programs to help them reach their goals.
Awesome. And I'm hoping you have some more people reaching out after this episode. Today, we're going to be talking the what, when, how to train for Chattanooga area boulders. I've always said that if Chattanooga had the weather of Waco tanks or, several areas in the Western United States, it might be the world's best bouldering destination. But the weather tends to be a problem for a lot of people. So longer trips make more sense there, I think. And it's really fun, I guess, to get a whole season there. I've had one, though it rained most of the season. The rock is just plain incredible and nearly endless. It's everywhere. And most people, I think, will think of the big three of chat bouldering, which is Stone Fort, used to be called Little Rock City, Rocktown, which is in Georgia, and Horsepins 40, which is in Alabama. So it's all in this little tri-state zone. But there are quite a few smaller satellite zones all around the area, like Zond, the Hospital Boulders, Dayton, Dogwood, Pep Boys, a bunch of areas around there. I started going to Chattanooga for crack climbing in the 90s and would spend, similar to you, like a few weekends every winter, 2 weeks around Christmas. that eventually morphed into bouldering, and now I've spent a fair amount of time down there, but it never seems like enough. Tell me a little more about going to University of Virginia and coming down there to climb.
Yeah, so I started climbing when I was 10 years old. Started as a youth competition climber. I grew up in Northern Virginia, so it was pretty far away from any real outdoor rock climbing.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I grew up in the gym. Kind of went through a teenage burnout phase that I think is fairly common.
Yeah.
When I was 16 to 18-ish, so kind of through the first year of college, I wasn't climbing. And then over the summer between my first and second year in school, I started climbing again. And that's when I started climbing outside, which was a really special transition for me because to me, once I started climbing outside, there was this big, just it felt like everything clicked and everything made a lot more sense.
Mhm.
And just, yeah, felt like a good uh, fit for me and way to motivate and have a passion for climbing. So when I started climbing again in college, um, I joined the university climbing team, and the first trip I ever took to the southeast was for the Stone Fort Triple Crown competition.
Mm.
Um, which I will say, yeah, I've done a number of outdoor competitions and had them be my first time ever climbing in an outdoor area, and it's actually really fun
Yeah, I
because there's
bet.
just pads everywhere. You're just trying to get as many climbs as you can. It's always a good vibes, good environment, good community. So, yeah, I had a great experience the first time I climbed in the Southeast.
That's awesome. I think the first time I ever climbed in horse pens was for a Triple Crown, and the first time I ever climbed at Hound Ears was a Triple Crown. First time I climbed in Boone, period, I think, was for a
Mhm.
Triple Crown. So that's really cool. The question everybody wants to know is, how did you do in that first Stone Fort comp?
Oh, well, that's kind of a funny story, but yeah, so I competed in the advanced category, which for the women I think was like V5 to 6.
Hmm.
And yeah, I had a really good day. I had a lot of fun. I was really proud of myself and was initially a little disappointed when I didn't place, but then later found out that the girl who won the category actually cheated. Uh,
Uh-oh.
yeah, so it bumped me up into third. So I got third in
I
the
remember
advanced
that year,
category.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So I got a free jacket from it, which is cool.
And you've done Triple Crowns since then. Do you want to tell us a little about your Triple Crown history?
Yeah. So I did a couple more when I was in college. I did the horse pens competition that same year, and then I think the next year I did the Hound Ears one. So I'd done each of the competitions once and competed in that advanced category. And then, yeah, coming back after living in Colorado, I kind of figured the Triple Crowns would be a great way to refamiliarize myself with the style. Nice way to kind of, yeah, circuit around, get a lot of volume. So I did the Triple Crowns this year. And yeah, was really stoked to win the open category overall.
Yeah. Awesome. Congrats. I,
Thank
I I
you.
had a lot of fun watching the results every time they came out, and psyched for you.
Thanks. Yeah, it felt really good. Like things had come full circle to come back, and um, it was also something I never imagined doing when I was in college and
Yeah.
competing in that advanced category. So it was yeah, definitely a really cool experience.
Yeah. And then you moved back to Chat, you said. So how long have you been
Mhm.
there now?
Uh, just over a year now, actually.
Nice. It's
Yeah,
good to have that, like, ability to cherry pick the good days outside.
for sure.
Let's talk a little about the what of the area. What would you say characterizes the climbing there for folks who have not been?
Sure. Yeah. So, a big characteristic I would say of sandstone is that it creates good, comfortable holds, but not a lot of things kind of in between those holds. So not a
Mhm.
lot of intermediates, not a lot of features in between. So a lot of times it creates just big, powerful moves, or even if you're on a slab, still kind of big, delicate type climbing. And then while there is like a big variety of angles, I'd say the South is most known for being the steep South, having, yeah, these steeper, thuggy, powerful type
Mhm.
climbs.
Yeah, and I think, the fact that the holds do seem to get a little more spaced out lends itself to this learning how to use friction to your advantage, either whether it's smearing and stepping on things that don't look like something you want to step on, or being able to use really horrible slopey intermediates because the friction is available, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then the other thing I think that the South is really known for is that the top outs get really real. Um, Mantles that actually require pushing and might not have what a lot of gym climbers will even consider as holds.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely a lot of mantle cruxes. There are definitely climbs where the entirety of the grade comes from the mantle.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good place to practice those skills.
Yeah, I remember you had posted, a video, I think, of Hustle and Flow.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that
Uh-huh.
right? And
Uh-huh.
I messaged you and just told you very briefly that I had actually punched myself in the jaw on that top out. Um, it was one of my first V10s, maybe my second or third, and I was just cruising. And you do, or at least the way that I did it, was kind of a big cross to a big
Mhm.
slopey hold, and then you
Mhm.
unwind into the mantle. And when I
Mhm.
was unwinding, I was like being so like casual about it that I wasn't paying close attention to what I was doing. And when I unwinded, as I came across my body, I hit myself in the jaw really hard
Mm.
and was like seeing stars and spinning, and my feet were just dangling while I'm, half of my body's beached wailed over the top, and
Yeah.
finally got it back together and topped it out, but almost
Wow,
knocked
that's
myself off the
impressive.
boulder. any
Yeah.
any great top out stories from your time there?
Oh, I mean, that boulder specifically, Hustle and Flow, it was kind of a situation where I wanted to practice the top out so that I knew I could do it when I got there, but
Mhm.
never actually did the mantle until it was the sun go, because I got the advice of, "When you get there, you're gonna really wanna do it, and, that's what will make the difference," and that was very true.
Yeah, that's a dangerous thing to do, but it does pay off now and then.
Mhm, for sure.
The You made some notes here in our shared document that I think is really important to mention. That if, especially if you're coming from the West, where there's tons of public land, um, the South is very different.
Yeah, yeah. So the South is a ton of private property. There's not like yeah, a lot of the climbing's not on national forest land or national or like, yeah, land bureau land. It's
BLM or
BM,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's a lot of private property, so it kind of seems like that goes two different ways. One is that the landowners um will have you pay to climb on the land or access. It unfortunately can kind of create a little bit of like a gatekeeping
Mhm.
culture where it's just like, yeah, you have to tread pretty lightly, can't be um, necessarily spraying about these areas, just because it's really easy to lose access.
Mhm. Yeah, and the Southeastern Climbers Coalition is down there, works tirelessly with landowners, property managers, to make sure that we still have access to some of these areas. So if you're down there, if you're taking a trip there, definitely consider donating to the SCC or going to their events, those types of things. Um, you mentioned that this past season, an area lost access.
Yeah, so it's kind of in the works, I'd say, with the SCC, fortunately. But yeah, it's this climbing area that is on I guess I don't know if it's quite private yet, but it's on land that's currently being developed for housing. Um,
Mm,
and so previously, before they started building houses, um, I think it was like a major hike to get to the boulders, kind of probably a bunch of bushwhacking. But then as these houses started being developed, a road was built and it became a
sure.
lot easier to then access the boulders. And like I said, the SEC has been working with the property managers, and it was still allowed to go to these boulders, drive up the road, all of that. But it just kind of gained popularity pretty quickly, and um, got pretty crowded pretty quickly. And then I think it sounds like some folks were maybe just not being as respectful as needed, and kind of causing some disruptions, like just parking in the middle of the road, it sounded like. Or
Right.
yeah, and so of course the people who uh, are living there now got upset, and so the at least access was temporarily um, revoked. But yeah, the SEC is working with them. I know there's a day, actually, maybe next week, where the boulders will be open for everyone.
Mm.
And so yeah, we'll just kind of have to see the future of access at that crag.
Yeah, especially with a road going in while they're developing, and it's got to create that mentality of get it while you can.
Yep,
So I'm sure that
totally.
put a major strain on the area, and it used to be like in the 90s when I was learning to climb, you would see this noted in the magazines a lot where writers would tell a story about some scary encounter with a landowner or something, and that clued you into the sensitivity of the access. But I think as bouldering has gotten more and more popular and it's easier to find directions to get to a place and guidebooks to know what the problems are, um, that message has gotten lost a little bit. It's still in the guidebooks, but
Right,
we just tend to flip to what we want to climb on, right?
right.
So I think it's
Yeah,
important that we mention those things, and I'll have links to the SCC in the show notes and in the blog post for this episode. So again, if you're climbing down there, definitely consider donating and finding out what the access situations are to any of these sensitive areas.
yeah.
We have a question in our document that's really pertinent to areas like Waco tanks where you might need knee pads or something like that. And the question was, is there any special equipment needed for the area's climbing style? Um, One thing that I think you need for southern bouldering is extra skin if you can somehow bring
Mm,
that.
mhm.
The rock is like climbing on 80 grit sandpaper. It's fantastic for friction, but on slopers, you're going to be sliding and your tips are going to end up bright pink, nearly guaranteed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's a blessing and a curse, I guess, where yeah, you don't get a lot of kind of the sharp crystals or anything like that, where it can kind of wear on your skin in like one certain spot. So it does wear your skin evenly, which is nice
Yeah.
in some ways, but in other ways it wears it all. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah, and I think, one thing that may not be as pertinent today as it used to be is, the brush type that you carry when you come to these
Oh,
areas. If you're used to granite or limestone, nylon brushes can be really valuable to get into those little, cracks and crevices between crystals or in pockets. But they're a little harsh for a lot of the sandstone in the southeast. So natural hair brushes are certainly the better choice for down south.
yeah, and I actually remember last year the SEC did make a post about that as well. With
Mm,
yeah, it does kind of just wear down the holds, and the nylon brushes will wear down the holds and just wear them a lot quicker. So when possible, definitely using natural hair brushes.
Where do you stand on the slapping slopers with t-shirts
Oh,
tactic?
I guess I haven't thought about it very much, but it seems fine to me.
Is it a valuable tactic, do you think? Is it better than brushing?
I bet it feels really good. I personally I personally haven't really done that, but
I haven't
it seems
either. I
like
just remember it from videos years and years ago, all these shirtless dudes slapping the boulders with their t-shirts.
it seems like it would just be like a good way to like exert your energy, especially if you're frustrated.
Yeah, it's not a thing that I do, but if it's a way to get your energy in the right place, go for it.
Yeah.
Let's talk when. I think in the West, you can climb pretty much year round if you can find shade or you can go up to a higher elevation. Um, that's a little tougher in the Southeast, and there are pretty distinct seasons, right?
hmm
What would you say is the prime season for the Southeast?
Yeah, I would say the prime is probably November through January, sometimes through uh, part of February. But it also varies from year to year, so it can be kind of tough to say exactly. But yeah, I'd say the prime season is between November and January, and then you kind of get these shoulder seasons on either end. So depending on the year, you can have a really cool fall and get a lot more climbing in than maybe in other years, or same on the other end. Sometimes it just stays cooler for the spring, and you get a really good spring season, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's really rainy, a rainy fall or a rainy spring, or it just gets hot really quickly. So,
Hmm.
um, safest bet would be November through January.
And if you're a person who's got 2 weeks off of work and you're like, I need to maximize my time. I need to be the best possible 2 week window. And they're totally going to blame it on you if they get rain.
Oh,
Which two
yeah.
weeks would you say are the best? What month?
Well, see, here's the thing. This past year, everyone was in town for New Year's because that's
Yeah.
when everyone had. So yeah, I guess the 2 week period is between Christmas and New Year's, and unfortunately, it was like the worst 2 week window of the season,
Hmm.
and everyone ended up in the gym on New Year's Eve, which
Which is
is
kind of fun.
it was fun, but also everyone was like very bummed. So,
Grumbly.
yeah, it's really hard to say, but yeah, I guess, like, late December, early January would seem like it would be the best, but there's really no guarantees.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I just wanted to put you on the spot there. Um, yeah, I spent a lot of Christmas, New Year's 2 week periods in the Southeast for many, many years when I lived in Cincinnati. And by and large, I would say we got good weather most of the time.
Yeah.
Um, what are the things, if you're looking at the weather, if you're the usual climber, constantly checking your weather app and looking at, the wind and the humidity and all of the other things that might come into whether you have a good day bouldering or not, as if you can change those things. Um, what are the things that are most important to look at in the Southeast?
Yeah, so I would definitely say the humidity is much more the bigger factor than the temperature, because you can have really cold temps, but then if it's humid, it makes no difference. Or it can be a warmer day where maybe normally you would think it'd be too warm, but if the humidity's low, things can still be really sticky. Um, so I guess the exact percentage, am not, I haven't gotten that picky, but yeah, I think in the South, it's probably I guess, I don't wanna speak
Well, if you're
incorrectly,
if you're
but
coming from the West, it's going to look crazy
terrible.
huge no matter what.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't get away from that.
I think the rule of thumb is, like, if the humidity and the temperature add up to less than 100, you're good.
Hmm.
Is kind of what I've heard.
All right. I like it.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind. Keep your calculators handy
Yeah.
and figure that stuff out. Yeah, I agree. The humidity definitely makes the difference down there. You're going to slide more, you're going to lose more skin. It's going to feel really frustrating. Moves you could do easily a few days before, you might not be able to do at all just because the humidity is so much higher.
Mhm.
There's also the situation where it rains and it's going to be more humid even though it's drying out, and the sun comes out, the air gets more humid as the water's evaporating, whatever. um, there can be a lot of situations where you get condensation on the undersides of the steep stuff. um,
Mhm.
and then there is the rain itself to contend with. Sandstone is more porous, so the question of how soon can we climb on it is a tough one, I think.
Yeah, for sure, and it's something, I'm still learning as a local. I guess the one advantage we have in the sandstone here in the South versus areas like Joe's, or like Roy, New Mexico, is that there is a lot more quartz in our sandstone here, so it
Hmm.
is a bit harder. It's not quite as soft
Yep.
as some of the sandstone out west. But I generally like if it's wet, I don't wanna mess with it. It's kind of
Yep.
my attitude.
Yeah, and I think if you're in doubt, if it's been a couple days since it rained, but it's still fairly humid, there are plenty of climbs that don't have in cuts as well.
Mhm,
They're just big bulbous slopers that, at least to common sense, seem a little safer than grabbing little in cut crimps that could totally ruin a boulder if it breaks off.
mhm. For sure, for sure.
So there are ways
Yeah.
to hedge your bets, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, and again, it can kinda just depend, and, if you're able to, yeah, get advice from the locals, I would say that's probably
Yeah.
the safest thing to do, because there are some times where it does rain, but just the way that the temperatures go, like if it gets really cold, everything can be totally dry,
Yep.
and totally fine, because everything just kind of yeah, it the rock isn't sweating, but it can go the
Mhm.
opposite direction where, like, maybe it doesn't rain at all, but, the temps, kinda shoot up really quickly, and then everything's sweating.
You get all that
So,
condensation. Yeah, that's good beta. Talk
yeah.
to a local, especially if you're coming from the West where, there's almost no humidity and things dry out really, really fast. Um, it can be a wildly different thing in the Southeast where it might stay damp and wet for days afterward. And, they're in these, a lot of the boulders are in these forests that kind of hold the wetness inside of them. So it can be tricky. Talk to a local's good beta.
Mhm.
All right. What everybody wants to know here is, let's jump into the how. How do we train for? What are the things we need to know to make sure that we have a good trip to Southeast Boulders? Um, One of the things I find really interesting in a lot of areas is that as you build up and hit a certain level, there are going to be things that become different for you, um, and that are required for you to learn. Do you think there are things um, in the levels from, say, V0 to V7 that change dramatically between grades, or do you think it's a steady buildup?
Yeah, I think in the Southeast, at least, just, the way that sandstone can kind of the climbs that sandstone creates is that there is just a really large concentration of climbs between V0 and 7, I'd say.
Hmm.
It's like the best place to circuit at those grades. There's just so
Totally.
many climbs, which is awesome, and was pretty much like the opposite experience I had in Colorado, at least, where there's, like, virtually nothing to warm up on or yeah, like, you're warming up on V7 kinda thing. So
Yep.
yeah, that is one really nice thing about sandstone is there's just a lot of available climbs. So, in that way, you're able to kind of pick and choose a little bit more, pick and choose which style of climb you want to get on, or if one doesn't quite fit you, there's always another.
And
And then
very
I think,
often, like right there, you can turn around and
oh
see
yeah,
10 other classic boulders.
yeah, the areas are super, super concentrated. Yeah, you can just romp around all day and get on a ton of different climbs.
hmm Yeah, I think that's one of the coolest things about those areas. I remember the first time I went to Waco, people were like, it's so concentrated here. It's so dense, so many boulders. And I'm like, you've never climbed in the Southeast, have you? Because this seems really spread out in comparison.
Hmm.
It's you can literally like it's somewhere like Stone Fort, you can stand in a spot and spin in a circle and see 25 great boulders.
Yep, totally. Yeah, and then you walk 10 feet and do the same thing, 360, and there's another 25 boulders.
Yeah, exactly. It's so cool.
Yeah.
What do you think makes the difference as climbs get harder in the Southeast?
Yeah, so kind of as you start getting beyond that V7 grade, one, there's definitely just fewer climbs, as you start getting into those harder grades, so just fewer to choose from, and then, kind of like what I mentioned before is, uh the rock just doesn't lend itself to a lot of intermediates, a lot of foothold options. So it is in a lot of cases that maybe the holds get further apart, or of course the holds do get worse, but I'd say the bigger difference is just the yeah, it can kind of start to get a little bit what I call morpho, where it just
Mhm.
becomes a little bit more body size dependent sometimes.
Mhm. And what is your height and span, if you don't mind telling us?
Yeah, so I'm 5 foot even, and then my span is 5'2".
Okay.
So I'm
And
small.
are there boulders that you have decided you just will never do?
I try not to have that attitude of
Mhm.
never doing something because surely it is possible, maybe. You
I was
know,
hoping you were gonna say this because I love this attitude, and I think it's one of the things that has made you successful is this attitude of, "I'm not going to discount this just because my size doesn't fit what would be easiest on this boulder."
right. Yeah. So there's definitely, yeah, V7s that I might not do till I climb V13 elsewhere,
Mhm,
but that's fine. Uh, um, or yeah, climbs that I just know are going to be harder for me, and that's okay too. But yeah, I think if anything, what I've learned from leaving the Southeast and then coming back is that there are a lot more possibilities than maybe I would originally think. Because I know
mm,
for myself, when I left the Southeast, I would say, I had climbed, I would say I was a solid V7 climber. I had climbed a handful of eights and maybe a couple of nines, but definitely was like the most well versed in V7. Never thought I'd do a Southeastern double digit. To me, that was just like way out of reach. And
mhm.
then coming back, my one goal was like, okay, that'd be cool to do a Southern V10 this year, and then um, surprised myself and did many more.
Yeah, what do you think made the difference?
I think that yeah, one, I was stronger for sure coming back, but I also just was a more experienced climber, was more well versed in, yeah, different kinds of movement. And then I think what made a really big difference too was, yeah, I actually moved here about a year ago. So I moved here in the summer, which is not the most ideal. It's really hot, but I spent all summer in the gym,
Yeah.
and I climb at Synergy, climbing a ninja here in town, and the I found that the setting actually did a very, very good job of preparing me for what I encountered outside. So yeah, definitely moves that are more powerful, dynamic. You kind of have to throw yourself around quite a bit more, but which was really uncomfortable for me at the start. But
Right.
yeah, prepared me well for the outdoor climbing here.
Yeah, I think that the like new style of gym setting with these, big macro holds, big bulbous things, and not tons of tiny little crimps like there used to be in gyms. Um, we hear folks constantly complaining that that doesn't prepare you for outside climbing, but it does actually prepare you pretty well for southeastern climbing, getting comfortable on those slopey holds where it's just friction and position dependent. And
Hmm.
then, like you said, being able to just fling yourself around is really
Yeah,
valuable out there.
yeah, it's definitely very gymnastic type climbing here.
hmm And I would say there's some really good beta hidden in what you said there, and that don't get discouraged if it seems hard to make that jump into the double digit boulders, especially if you're a shorter climber, or just harder boulders in general. Doesn't matter if it's double digit. The jump from V5 to V7 can feel massive when you're at that spot. Um, I think if you have the opportunity to do so, spend some time on slopers indoors, paying particular attention to the positions you're using, and if you can get good at like compression style heel hooking and squeezing, you're going to be set up really well for climbing in the Southeast.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and also kind of circling back to some of what you said earlier with that kind of friction, using friction, uh, and yeah, learning how to use non footholds. Basically, honestly, like the South has some of the worst footholds I've ever tried to use, especially on the kind of slab climbing, which
Yeah.
is another thing I think is pretty cool and unique about the South is just how varied the terrain can be. Like I said, I know there's kind of this association with the South being the steep South, and of course that is kind of like the quintessential style we think of. But
hmm
I know at least from living in Colorado, it's like you pretty much get the same thing all over, right? It's like
Right.
overhung tension crimping. It's pretty much what you get no
hmm
matter what area you go to. Whereas here, it's you can do a full day of just slab climbing because there's tons of slabs, and you can challenge yourself in that way. And then the next day, go and only get on steep climbing. So I think that's another really nice thing about the South.
Yeah, totally. You can't walk through Stone Fort without looking at space and
Hmm.
wishing you could climb that thing.
Oh my
Um, I've
gosh.
tried it so many times and never.
Yeah. I it spooks me out a little bit given that
Yeah.
the crux is at the very top of the boulder.
Totally. It's way easier to just jump off than it is to commit to doing those moves up there. It feels tall. It's in this funny little corridor. It's definitely unnerving.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually in that corridor, that is where I did, like, one of the slab only days. There's, like, I don't know, I was falling all over V4 that day.
Mhm.
There's a lot of really hard slab climbing
Yeah, and
over
it's
there.
it's so fun to learn that style, I think. And you really don't get that same sort of friction on other rock. So,
Mhm. For sure.
definitely do it if you can, if you're out there and you have the time, it's a really smart thing to do.
Mhm.
Do you think there is a best grade in the Southeast? If you had to choose a grade, what is the absolute best?
I'm leaning towards V7.
That's my pick too.
Yeah, it's there's yeah, like I said, there's just so many, and it's like it gets to this difficulty where yeah, you do have to really like focus in and concentrate and yeah, be smart about your movement. But at the same time it's can feel pretty achievable. Yeah.
I agree. Let's talk a little bit about like some of the specifics of down there and how we can better prepare for them. We've already mentioned that a lot of the gym styles really lend itself. So, don't just spend all your time on the moon board when you're in the gym. Actually do some of those bigger macro hold, jumping around to big bulbous things kind of climbing, as well as lean into the compression style, I think will prepare you. Is there a way to prepare in the gym and feel totally okay saying, I don't think so, because that's probably my answer,
Mhm.
for the mantles?
Oh, goodness. Um, yeah, those are gonna definitely be, like, very specific and learned
Mhm.
yeah, getting on the rock is gonna be the best way to do that, but, yeah, if you were to prepare yourself or try to prepare yourself for it, I mean, it's definitely, again, just given how full body the climbing is overall here and how full body mantles are just yeah, doing some strength training,
Mhm.
and just preparing your body to be as strong as it can be going into climbing here.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the best way to prepare for those outside of actually climbing on the rock.
Mhm.
I think once you're there, if you can, if you find yourself being stumped at a lot of the mantles, then maybe just stepping the level down for a day or two and getting used to what you can get away with when you're actually mantling over the top of some of these things is a really smart way to go.
Yeah, and the nice thing too is there are a lot of practice boulders that you can do.
Hmm.
One specifically that I'm thinking of is, Fish Market.
Man,
Um
such a hard mantle.
Yeah, and there's also, like, a slightly easier one to the right, I can't remember exactly
Hmm.
what it's called, but it's like a
Yep.
V1 or V2 mantle, and then Fish Market's a V3 mantle, and they're both super close to the ground, so it's like you only need 1 pad, and I would say that's, like, a perfect way to practice.
It hurt my soul a little bit when you said Fish Market is a V3 mantle.
Yeah, it hurts everyone's souls.
Yeah, there's also swingers, I think, is a
Mhm,
a good way to
that's true.
learn what you can get
Mhm,
away with. There's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of them all
mhm,
around those areas. Do you have a
yeah.
preferred area of the big 3?
Um they're all different in their own way, which is really cool. I think this season I probably spent the most time at Stone Fort, so that's kind of where I would kind of trend towards and choose, but, I definitely would like to spend more time at the other 2.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm sort of the same. I've spent way more time at Stonefort than all of the others. Let's take a quick commercial break, and then we'll come back. I want to talk a little bit about the differences in those 3 areas. What you see the differences as, and then we'll talk some more fun stuff like the must-do boulders, what your favorites are, the overlook classics, that kind of thing. Are you searching for a training structure that actually works? For over a decade, we've helped climbers prepare for their goals. We've seen patterns emerge, showing what's most effective for each level of climber. Those patterns became our proven plans, a training system that you can follow from complete beginner to V double digits. Delivered through our mobile app with workouts geared toward your goals and focused on improving not only strength and power, but tactics and mindset as well, each proven plan comes with a built-in group chat and an option to work directly with one of our coaches. We don't believe in a one-size-fits-all approach to climbing. You shouldn't either. All right, we're back, and I want to know, you said that the big 3 are pretty different, and I agree. And I've always thought this is one of the coolest things about going to Chattanooga is you can have a pretty different style on really similar rock at the 3 areas, the 3 big areas. So what are the differences in your mind between Horse Pens, Rocktown, and Stone Fort, Little Rock City?
Yeah, so for horse pens, definitely the thing that sticks out to me is a lot of not all of them, but a lot of the boulders tend to be shorter. And
Mm,
so to me, a lot of those climbs just pack like a really strong punch, where,
yeah.
yeah, it's like 2 moves and then you're to the mantle, or, yeah, just a handful of moves and then you're on top of the boulder. So, um, I definitely consider those to be maybe some of the more intense or the more intense area a lot is the association I have in my head.
I hadn't even thought about that, but you're totally right. Horse pens is definitely the shorter of the three.
Hmm. Yeah, which is nice because it's like, a little playground, very doable with one or two pads.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you can run around and get a lot done for sure.
Totally. It for me, and tell me if you agree, horse pens is also like the more big, giant sloper dependent of the three.
Hmm.
We see the photos of like centipede and millipede, and it's really easy to be fooled about an area by the main photos you see, and then you get there and you're like, oh, it's not all like this, but I thought it
Hmm.
was. I think horse
Hmm.
pens really is like that.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you definitely get a handful of climbs that have crimps on them, but yeah, the predominant style there definitely seems to be, yeah, slapping slopers, yeah, busting egos, that kind of thing. I would
Yeah,
say, I guess, kind of along those lines, Horse Prince probably has the stoutest grading of the three, too, the
yeah,
most
it,
sandbagged.
it does
It's like
seem that
add 2
way.
grades to everything there.
Yeah, and the locals are really good at sandbagging you. They can just do things in their gym shoes that seem impossible at first.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, the locals who regularly circuit there will definitely have you fooled on the difficulty of things.
Yeah, totally. And what about Rocktown? What's the difference there?
Yeah, so Rocktown I almost think of as, maybe a middle ground between Horse Pens and Stone Fort. I guess can I jump to Stone Fort
Yeah, do
and
it.
then come back to, yeah. So Stone Fort I almost associate more with more vertical type climbing, a little
Mm,
bit less of that really, really steep. It's
mhm,
like you get the slab, you get vert, you get slightly off vert. There are, a handful of pretty steep climbs there, but I'd say the majority is just in this vert or off vert type of angle. So you do still get some of the slopers and the big full body climbing, but I'd say there's also a lot more kind of crimp lines there. Yeah. And it can get, yeah, a little more technical with the footwork, and that's
mhm.
kind of what pops into my head when I think of Stone Fort.
Yeah. The first time I went to Stone Fort, I was a trad climber way back in the day, and it wasn't open for climbing yet, and you had to park on the highway up by the water tower and hike in the back, and you came in the Dragon Lady corridor,
Mhm.
which is one of the coolest little zones of climbing I've ever experienced, just this little corridor with classics on both sides. There's so many great boulders there. And I was like, well, this is really cool, but what's everybody making the big deal for? Because eh, I was told you couldn't leave the corridor because the golfers might see you.
Oh.
And I was like, this place is tiny. Why do people think it's so cool? And it wasn't until a Triple Crown years later that I came back and was like, "Oh,
Oh.
it's
Mhm.
expansive."
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, kind of in that same V0 to 7 range is just so many rock climbs.
So good. And Rocktown is a little more spread out.
Yeah, it is, and I would say angle-wise, it does start to get, I would say kind of the majority of the climbs start to get into more of a steeper
Mhm,
terrain. Yeah, I'm thinking like Sherman Photo Roof and Nose Candy. Those are kind of 2 of the very classic climbs, and
mhm.
those get steeper. Yeah, the rock it's just featured a little bit differently. I almost think there are more kind of crimpy type climbs there.
Yeah, it seems like there's this patina at Rocktown that creates these, like, iron end cuts a little
Mhm,
more often. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's kind of a blend of the 2.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, so each area definitely has its own style, and people enjoy it for different reasons, and, but yeah, they're all awesome.
Yeah, totally. Let's talk some of the must-dos. These are the boulders that at their grade are kind of the archetypal style for the area that you think really say, welcome to the Southeast? V0 to V3.
Yeah, so first I'll say that this was very difficult to pick.
It's
Only
so hard.
Yeah,
It's
only
so
one. There's
hard.
because each of these, so I with these I chose that kind of steep south style,
Mhm.
thuggy gymnastic type climbing. But I could also choose slab climbs at each of these grades that would,
Yeah.
similarly be uh still the southern style.
Mhm.
Um, but I haven't done many of the slab climbs because that is not my forte. So we went with the steep.
And you can give
Yeah.
some honorable mentions here. So let's start with V0, V3, and you can come up with some off the top honorable mentions.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I chose Swingers, which is at Stone Fort. It's a V3/4.
Yeah, I was gonna say it used to be
Where
called 4, I think.
I think maybe the Triple Crown book called it V3 or something,
Mhm.
but I think it kind of can go either way. But yeah, it starts just in a super steep roof. You kind of do some big pulls between edges, kind of have to coordinate the body tension, and it's called swingers because at one point you have to cut feet. Your feet are
Mhm.
kind of sucked in under you in the start hold. You get this like pretty bomber heel toe cam, but yeah, there's not a lot of feet in between. It's really hard to like try and keep that tension or break it up in any way other than to just do a big rip, which is fun and very satisfying. And then yeah, you keep climbing up, and then you get to a kind of techie mantle.
Yeah, very,
So
very southern mantle. It's nice because it's easy to pad. It's,
yeah,
you're not very high off the ground when you're doing the mantle. Somebody
hmm
can be right on you when you think you're
yeah,
sliding off. So I think that's a
yeah,
really great call. I love that one.
yeah, very very fun. Um,
My pick for V0 to V3 is also at Stonefort, and I'm going with Incrediret, which is
oh,
in that front little warm up zone, right
mm-hmm,
next to like main event and just around the
mm-hmm,
corner from the wave.
mm-hmm,
Um, it's like V0 or V1. I'm not sure which.
mm-hmm,
But the thing I really like about it is that it for a V0 or 1, it's really technical.
mm-hmm.
You're not going to get up it if you're just trying to pull down on all the holds. It requires some shifting of your weight around the corner and some interesting positioning. And then it's just tall enough to be a little spicy and get
Oh
you
yeah,
ready for the day. So I think I climbed that one probably 5 or 6 times every day that I'm there.
yeah. That is that kind of well, I have a friend who's like, "Are you a front girl or a back girl?" Which means like, do you like to start in the front area or do you like to start in the back? And
Mhm.
I think a lot of people are front people for that. Yeah, that first warm up area where you do get a ton of V0 to 3 uh,
Mhm.
in different styles, and yeah.
Yep, I love it. V4 to V7. This is where it got really hard for me because there's so many amazing boulders in these grades.
Yeah, and I mostly chose the one I chose just trying to get around to a bunch of the different areas in the Southeast. But yeah, I chose Golden Showers, which is a V5 at Rocktown. And yeah, it's just a kind of compression boulder. It's known to be a shorty nemesis. It's kind of one
Mhm.
of those where it has some big spans, but it's just really fun, thuggy climbing. And it does have a bit of a mantle at the end. Nothing quite as technical as some of the others, but still a little spicy.
Yeah, it's just tall enough that it feels a little heady up there, and the holds aren't jugs necessarily, and you're powered down a little bit when you get there. And it's on just an incredible boulder that just stands by itself, right next to a creek in the middle of this little valley.
In
So
the
so good.
forest. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's so pretty. It's like one of the most aesthetic boulders, I
yeah,
think.
gorgeous. Uh, Give me some, because I know there are lots of them. Give me some honorable mentions in the V4 to V7 category
Honorable mentions.
that could be
Trying to think
winners
of.
on their own.
Yeah, I mean, V4, like, for me, what comes to my head is TriStar, which I think a lot of
Mm,
people kind of hate and actually don't really like very much, but it's just kind of, I don't know if it's
I love
it's
it.
classic. It's
Yeah.
classic. It's just, yeah, it's kind of more vertical climb, kind of. It's nice because, yeah, all those holds are in the same kind of vertical plane, so you do have to do that shifting around.
Hmm.
It's more technical in that way, where, yeah, you can't just pull down and get through it. You have to really climb your way through it.
Yeah, and that's in that
Um,
Dragon Lady corridor, and I think it's, like, perfectly contrasted with Dragon Lady also in the corridor. I think at the same grade, though
yep, yep,
definitely harder if you're shorter.
yep. Yeah, I think the Wave, which is a V6 at Stone Fort,
Yeah, that's
honorable.
one of my
It's like,
picks for sure.
yeah, just such a cool feature, so pretty, and just climbs really fun.
Yeah, and it's, like, it's right there in the front area, so it's it's really in a spot that will either bash your ego or make you feel like a superhero because everybody's walking past you, watching you
Mm,
climb on this incredible feature, you know?
mhm.
So I think it's a good, like, pressurized situation.
Yeah, I think it's pretty acceptable to struggle on the Wave. It's hard.
Oh, totally. I agree completely. But in the climber's head, it might not be the same. So
Yeah, yeah.
one of my
Um,
other picks is Tennessee Thong.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
Also probably a tough one for the shorties. It's got
Yeah,
a pretty big span on it, though there's some really interesting, cool beta that I've seen, some
mhm,
shorter climbers use. Um, I for me, it's my pick for best V7 at Stone Fort, which is
mhm,
a tough mantle to take up.
mhm. Yeah, it's, there's a lot of V7s at Stone Fort, so that's definitely, uh yeah, it can be hard to choose one. That T-thong is one that I, have not done yet and might take me a few seasons to do, but it goes. It's just really
Yeah.
hard if you're small.
It's just such cool, like, angles and
The
features.
whole
It
yeah.
looks like a transformer to me, like, every time I look at it, I expect it to, like, rearrange into some creature
Hmm,
because of the interesting, cool angles that it sits at, and it's
mhm.
just so cool.
Yeah, yeah.
V8 to V10.
Yeah, so for this one, I chose River Dance, which is a V9 at Dayton, which is, it's about 40 or 45 minutes from Chattanooga. Um, Really scenic area,
Mhm.
giant
So pretty.
river, yeah, and there's, yeah, just this gorgeous boulder on the river. You if you've if you've looked up pictures of climbing around Chat, you've probably seen a picture of it. But yeah, it's a pretty, it's kind of like a climb on an arête, and yeah, it just kind of lends itself to that compression, thuggy style.
Yeah, this was one of my first V9s and for sure my favorite V9 I've ever done, but it also did a number on my left knee and hamstring
Mm,
that
mhm.
still shows up today, so,
Yep, yep. Definitely a high and intense heel hook for the left.
yep, be ready
Yeah,
for that one. Um,
yeah.
and also, you recently put up a video on your Instagram of capoeira, which is a lower start and
Mhm,
lower into the right start into river dance that goes at
mhm,
V10,
mhm.
which is also mega classic and just so cool. That little spot, you kinda walk down into a little hole that this boulder sticks up out of, that sits on the river, and it's so cool.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the beauty of that boulder is that there are a number of different entrances into
Mhm.
river dance, and, yeah, the beauty of it is that river dance is still the crux for all of those boulders,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is rad. I think it's a pretty stout 9. I definitely
Mhm.
thought it was hard, and yeah, just being able to do that last crux, coming in from a number of different entrances still is, the hardest part, which is super cool.
Yeah, and Riverdance has one of those like slapping at a blank wall moments that I think show up in the Southeast, uh, where friction becomes your best friend. And it's not even a sloper you're hitting on the way to this other hold. It's just a flat blank wall, but everybody stops
Mhm.
there.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I think some people will just skip it if they have enough power, but that was definitely not the option for me.
Ooh,
Um,
me neither.
yeah, yeah.
My pick is a bit of a cliche, but I'm going with the orb at
Oh,
Rocktown.
yeah. Mhm, mhm,
Just because it's such a like, I mean, if you think of Rocktown, you think of the orb.
mhm.
That's pretty much set in stone, no pun intended, from years of seeing photos and hearing people talk about it and how stout it is and arguing about whether certain holds are on or off. And it's
Mhm.
just this like centerpiece when you first walk in, it's sitting there right in your face.
Yeah,
So that's my pick.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Um,
it gets a little thin as we get into the V11 and up range in the Southeast. And um, I think you made the good pick here.
yeah, yeah. So I chose God Module, which is a V11 at Horse Pens. I have not done this one yet. Definitely on the list to try, but yeah, it's a two mover, just hard two moves. I guess
Yeah.
technically, like sometimes the third move is still a thing too, but um, yeah, it's you start on a pretty good crimp, you get a nothing smear foot, and then you have to do a big generation to another crimp, and yeah, keep it together.
Yeah, and not at all like the horse pen style, but I think we've seen so many photos, videos of it. It's such an obvious feature when you walk up to it. It's the one you have to pick, I think.
Mhm. Totally.
All right, favorite boulder. What's your single personal favorite boulder of any grade in the Southeast?
Yeah, so, this season, the most special boulder to me, it's called The Last Samurai. It's a boulder that was put up by Nicholas Milburn in an area called Upper Middle Creek,
Mm,
which is just one of those satellite areas just in town, on Signal Mountain, and it was special to me because I got the second ascent of it,
mm, nice.
which yeah, it was really cool just given how accessible the climb is um, and it had been, I think, 4 years since Nicholas had done it and hadn't been repeated yet, and the style was pretty much not Southern style, which I liked. It was just crimping on an overhang,
Mm,
tension, um, and definitely kind of more my style, of climbing. So it was really fun to get to work on a climb that had that higher difficulty. It's 11/12, and yeah, just fun to work on something in my style at a more limit difficulty for me.
that's awesome. You have video of you on that one?
I do, yeah. It's on my Instagram.
Okay, it's on there.
Yeah,
I'll link to
yeah,
it in the blog post.
yeah.
Um, a question for you. You just said it had been unrepeated for 4 years. I know when I was coming up climbing, it might just be me or it might be the ethos of the South. There would tend to be these mythologies build up around boulders. And I'm curious if that still happens, if it happens to you. Was it the case with this one? Um, where there's just this mythology and nobody goes and tries the thing because of this mythology.
Yeah, I think this one, I think it just didn't get a lot of attention, so almost maybe the
Mm,
opposite where there
just went under the
wasn't.
radar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think, yeah, many people just haven't tried it, and it's good. It's, like, a really good boulder, so, hopefully it gets a little more attention. I think it'd be cool if it got some more ascent. And I guess this was also one of those situations where, the more ascents it gets, the more settled in the grade will be,
Sure.
which I think will be nice too.
Very cool. My pick for my favorite is, I think the name of it officially is Brown Eye Left.
Hmm.
It's in Rocktown. It's on the Big Bad Boulder.
Mm.
I knew it just as Big Bad
Mhm.
eons ago, but I think the actual name is Brown Eye Left, and it's just these really amazing pinches, big wide sandstone pinches. They're exactly like this old set of Technic pinches that used to be in all of the gyms, and they just seem really unlikely and improbable up this bulging wall, but it fits. It just works, and it's just a big off balance sort of throw to this sinker bucket jug that will hold water many
Mm.
days after a rain, just in case you're flashing and it rained a few days ago, you're probably going to get wet.
Mhm.
And it's a little bit high, so it feels a little spicy, but the top out is easy. Just such cool climbing. And when I was first bouldering down there, I was very much not a jumpy, dynamic climber, and this forced me into jumping off balance. So it just felt like this superhero move to me. So it holds a special place.
Nice. Yeah. I will have to check that one out.
Yeah, check it out. It's very cool. Um, let's talk some overlooked classics. I think in an area as expansive as the Southeast, there are lots and lots of overlooked classics. Let's talk some of the ones that are pretty easy to access, but people just
Mhm.
walk right past because of other boulders that they think are going to be better.
Yeah, so, I had initially written down Fish Market, which we already talked about, but that boulder's right behind some other classics, like Jerry's Kids
Mhm.
and The Big Much, and so I think it gets, walked past.
Yep.
Um, but yeah,
And it's low.
definitely.
It's a low boulder, and you're there
Yeah,
looking at Jerry's Kids, which is a taller boulder, and it's really easy to overlook that thing.
for sure, for
But it's such
sure.
a fun session. Everybody getting pumped and falling off the slopers and then frustrated by the mantle, and yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, yeah, definitely a must do. Um, and then I guess kinda sticking with Stone Fort, one of my favorite climbs is actually called the Mechanic, which is
Mhm.
just, it goes to the right of the wave, so I believe it starts in
I
the
think
same
so.
hold, but yeah, everyone does the wave, and then, the Mechanic. I know, a lot of people would say that it would be a classic if there wasn't this kind of dab rock behind it,
Right, right.
but for me, coming from Colorado, where
Yeah.
dab rocks are kind of the norm, I was like, "What are you talking about? This is great." So
Exactly.
I really like it, and it's kind of that similar where it's steep, kind of powerful, and then it gets into this transition into kind of a techie slab top out. So I really liked it.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you put this one on there. This is one of my favorites there. It's not super tall, so it's not super scary when you're flipping around the lip of the roof onto that techie slab, and one of those that seems improbable until you find the right combination of positions for yourself. So neat.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, pretty beta intensive and also, finding the beta that works well for you for that one.
Mhm. I've got one right around the corner from there, almost exactly on the backside of that, or the front side of that boulder,
Mhm.
which is Black Carpet. It's
Mhm.
a V4 that is often wet, so I think people end up just walking
Mm.
past it. It's like a normal, like, gym style climbing beginning, so it's really easy to get to the top, and then it's bafflingly cool.
Mhm.
So Black Carpet V4 right there on the as you're walking in. That's one of my picks.
Yeah, that one definitely has like a deceptively bad hold too. I think when you look at
Mhm.
it from the ground, you can see the sequence and you're like, okay, I know what I'm going to do. And then you get there and you're like, oh, I can't even pull on this hold.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. More Stone Fort. You've got several, and so do I from there. So let's lean into those.
Yeah. So some of these I haven't done, but have heard they're great. One is
Mhm.
called Simply Irresistible. It's kind of tucked away in a corridor, but it's got that kind of parkour gym style move where you
Mm.
get set up on a narette and then you do a big lunge to yeah, like a seam jug, and kind of have to simultaneously coordinate your left hand slapping. And um I think it's one of those that's like you can try it a million times and it kind of
Right.
sucks you in.
Where is this one? I'm not familiar.
I don't wanna speak wrong. I think I think it's towards the back, probably kinda towards instinct.
Mm. Cool.
Maybe. I might be speaking wrong, though.
Okay. I have one in the back there as well, that gets overlooked, and the name is a little unfortunate, but Country Redneck Bitch, which
Mm.
is V5. It's the Rite of Deception. It's on the same boulder as
Oh,
Deception.
okay.
It's heady. It's really neat, and for the grade, I think it's a really, really cool boulder,
Mhm.
especially to be climbing on that boulder. If you're a V5 climber, if you're any rock climber, you have certainly walked back to Deception and stared at that wall. Um,
Mhm.
and that arête is a really accessible way to the top of that boulder.
That's cool. Yeah, I'll have to try that.
Anything else from you at Stone Fort here?
Um, yeah, again, this was one that was kind of pointed out to me, but I haven't done it, but it's called New Sensations. It's a V10. It's back in the Biggie Shorty corridor, and
Mm,
it's just, another, like, two-move slab climb, kind of improbable. I think you do, like, a big stand up, on a crappy foothold, and again, just kind of like almost that, like, parkour or, like, gym style climb where you can just try it over and over and over and over.
mhm. That's cool. There's so many of those at Stone Fort. Maybe because it's close to town, easy to access. People could try things over and over and over for weeks and
Mhm.
weeks. But there's so many of those, like, you have to invent new moves to climb up this section of rock. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Have you heard of 6 Feet Under? It's a V5.
Um, yeah, I don't recognize that.
It's at Stone Fort. It's literally hidden in a hole. It's you get on top of the cliff band that kind of runs the length of Stone Fort, and then you drop into a hole, and there's this little like weird cave feature that you're in, and there's this really fun V5 that climbs out of the hole.
Hmm.
Um, so cool. There's a great video from Andrew Kornelak that I will put in the blog post here, of Brian Voges doing
Mm.
6 Feet Under. So super
Is
neat
that
one.
is that over by, like, Now and Zen over there, or no?
Where's Now and Zen?
It's kinda by the Chattanoogan.
It is up in that area. Yep.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you exactly what it's above, but it is closer toward the like middle back.
Mhm.
So very, very neat. You should definitely go look for it.
Cool.
Anything else at the other areas? Overlooked classics.
Um, yeah, again, there's just so much rock. But yeah, one that I put at Rocktown is called Blue. It's a V6. It's
So
right
good.
just up the hill from Golden Showers. Again, maybe one that everyone's so focused on
Hmm.
Golden Showers and Golden Harvest that this one gets missed. But yeah, super good, kind of techie slab slash arete climbing.
Hmm. So much fun. Such a neat little feature.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. My pick also at Rocktown is Gritstone Arete. It's a V3, really fun. Kind of hidden in a little spot that everyone walks around. It's kind of near Campus Punks.
Mm.
Pretty close to the Orb and the Vagina, that area. But kind of just hidden in a little spot where nobody goes. So,
Nice.
all right. If you had to pick, let's do two things here. Let's pick a favorite area of the big three.
Okay.
And what's the best area to go to if you're in a group with a bunch of climbers of varying levels? If you're on Christmas trip with all your homies, where do you go?
Okay, so I think my favorite of the 3, and I don't know, this could probably change every season or every year, but I always have a really good time when I go to horse pens, and I think, like, the beat down is it's just part of the experience, and sometimes I just like to be humbled, so, horse pens, I would say, is my favorite currently. That could change. Um, and then, going on a trip with a lot of different ability levels. Stone Fort is definitely awesome. It's got everything from V0 to there's a V13 there. So lots of a really good kind of grade spread.
Yeah. I think Stone Fort's definitely the best pick there. I think my favorite is Rocktown. I don't know. I just sort of like the more spread out hiking between the boulders feel of Rocktown. Maybe because I spent so much time at Stone Fort and Horse Pens where you literally can just spin in a circle and climb on
Mm-hmm.
new boulders all day. You never have to leave the same little zone.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite satellite area?
Um, that's a good question. Let me think for a second.
I'm going Dayton for sure.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think
I was
Dayton's
wondering
my
if that
favorite
counted.
area in the entire Southeast.
Yeah, Dayton's definitely like, it's definitely got that feel where you're kind of getting out of town, really
Mhm.
getting, into nature. Um, Probably most gorgeous scenery.
Yeah.
I'd say I also really like Middle Creek, just because of how close it is into town, and then also just kind of the wild concentration and just that super small area is really cool too.
Yeah, I don't think I've been to Middle Creek.
Really? Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
you
don't think
definitely gotta
so.
go. Yeah.
Cool. Favorite rest day activity because it's gonna rain and you're gonna have to take a rest day, whether you want to
Yeah.
or not.
I personally just like to go sit in a coffee shop, get those cozy feeling vibes. I'm also, I guess living here, it's just a nice to get out of my house to do work and go
Mhm.
go to a coffee shop.
Do you have a favorite part of town you like to go to when you go to coffee shops?
It kind of varies, but I live up in the North Shore here, and there's just a lot of fun little streets that have a bunch of different shops, and I don't know, it's just kind of a cute part of town.
Mhm.
All the shops are in, like, little houses and yeah.
Yeah, I've got the North Shore written down here for sure. I think if you're into doing touristy things, there's the aquarium
Mhm,
is quite good. I haven't been in a lot of years, but I do remember it
mhm,
being good. And then something my wife was really interested in when we were down there because she's from the West, is the like Civil War battlefields and Civil War
mm,
history was really
mhm.
interesting to her.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think there's also the option of exploring the other bouldering areas because there's so many. Take your chalk bag because you're going to want to touch holds, but
Mhm,
don't take your shoes because you're going to want to climb and it's a rest day.
mhm, mhm.
So I think those
Yeah.
are cool things to do. And one thing my wife and I do quite a bit when we're in the Southeast is go to antique shops and things like that. There's just you can find some really interesting and questionable things in antique shops in the Southeast. So
Mhm, for sure.
I think that's a really fun thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. When my parents came and visited, actually, we went to one of the battlefields, and yeah, it is funny to just remember
Mm-hmm.
that history, and
Yeah, it's a complicated history. I think it's worth, trying to wrap your brain around how this country became what it is. And I don't know if there's a better place to do it than in these battlefields where you really have to confront our history.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else you want to say about the Southeast before we wrap this thing up?
Yeah, leave the ego at the door.
Totally.
Rock climb to have fun. Don't take it too seriously, and I guess a little volume goes a long way with learning the style here.
Definitely, that's really good beta. And I think leave your ego at the door is for sure the best beta for climbing in the Southeast. Really fun, really frustrating. If ever there was a playground for rock climbing built, it would certainly look just like some of these areas. We'll have a bunch of other extras in the blog post for this, best guidebook, gear shops, gyms, things like that. We'll also have links to the SCC that you should be checking with and donating to. All sorts of other bonuses we'll have in there, as well as videos and links to Juliet's Instagram, so you can see some of her boulders, and especially if you need the shorty beta, she is the go-to for that. Before we wrap this up, Juliet, will you tell the folks one more time where they can find you online?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Juliet_Amanda, and then my website is julietamanda.com.
Awesome. And if you're looking for how to prepare for your Southeastern bouldering trip, reach out to Juliet. She's got you. Thanks so much for doing this. I'm already looking forward to the granite versus sandstone conversation we're going to have in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and you can find us at powercompanyclimbing.com, on the Instagrams, Facebooks, all of those places, at Power Company Climbing. And are you on Twitter?
No.
Good.
That scares me.
I like this.
Seems like a dark corner of the internet that I do not want to go to.
You will also not find us on Twitter because we don't tweet. We scream like eagles.
Maybe don't know.
This time, 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 power, this time to build power, this time to build power, this time to build power. 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 This time to build. 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 This time. Cause Jah is the sinister character. Audio.